Hello, YouTube. Gandalf here. Can you believe it? We're only 2 days away from the big anniversary event. So I thought I'd take a moment and, as someone who's been kind of around for almost a year with the game, is to take you through some of the major hero updates throughout the year and how they've been very impactful to the PvP meta. As many of you know, I cover a lot of PvP content. I think it'll be kind of fun to see how the game evolved very quickly, month by month. Just the moment when we thought, we got the hang of PvP and we know what the best teams are, the game throws in a new unit or does some sort of rework that keeps us on our toes and keep on thinking. I know some of you don't like that much rework, and you feel like your investment is kind of taken away a little bit every time when something new is introduced. But you know, when we do have smaller tweaks and changes that shift the meta, it does keep things a little bit more interesting and makes everyone on their toes and keep thinking about what is the best team comp to run or what are some of the best counters. So before I go into the gist of the year in review and talk about it, I thought maybe I could take a moment to do a little bit of self-advertising or a little bit of announcement for my channel and what's coming in store and what you can look forward to in September from me. So first of all, if you haven't subscribed, I really appreciate if you can kindly subscribe. And when you have subscribed, make sure that you turn on the bell notification there. And if you and that's what you need to do to ensure that you don't miss any great content that's coming from me, because I know a lot of you enjoy listening to me and the in-depth analysis you get, so you can stay ahead of others in terms of any new game mechanics that's coming out, new heroes, when the dungeon release, I promise on the first day, I'll do a quick guide so that if anyone's struggling with the puzzles, you can just follow along with the video and you will be able to solve them very quickly. So that's a promise to you. As soon as it drops in a couple of days, I'll be, right there solving it. You will be able to see a little bit of my struggle, but ultimately, you should get a pretty comprehensive guide on how to beat the tricky puzzles from those dungeons that we always have to face. Once you're subscribed, I highly recommend you go to my channel, and wherever you see my videos, I do take a lot of time to make sure I write out the description. So if you don't have time to, listen to me ramble on for 30 minutes, some of the highlights will already be covering the descriptions. We have a great community guild, so our link to our guild Discord is here. You're more than welcome to apply. And if you're new to this game or you're someone who's watching who actually doesn't play in Magicraid, you can check out the game here. My own Discord, feel free to add me on Discord if you have any questions directly. I'm always available to answer questions and try to get back to any comments you leave below as well. When you go to my channel, you will be able to find that I've created now a few playlists for you to dig into. I think if you really want to get into PvP, understanding some of the fundamentals around speed tuning and different roles hero play will be great for this. If you're looking for teams that work in high-end teams, this is where you want to go. If you want to actually see that I use some of my teams in practice, like for example, how do you find a very solid counter against Lydia teams when you don't have a Lydia yourself? That video is in this playlist. And of course, game mechanics explaining things like why attack matters in every sort of um, direct damage dealing hero. Mechanics about rolling, gear, min-maxing, it's all here in this playlist. So if you haven't had a chance to really dig through my channel, there's a lot of great in-game knowledge. I know some of them are very long, but take the time. I'm sure you will get a lot out of it. But if you're just looking for a quick screenshot, there are tier lists in my channel as well. So in the popular video section, you can see some of these where you can just quickly take a screenshot and you will find, what are some of the best heroes you should aim for in a reroll, for example, or, what heroes goes really well with certain stamps. So hopefully, that was a really quick ad for my channel. And sorry, this is like the first time I'm doing a little bit of self-promoting here. I appreciate you taking the time to listen. So let's go into, the year in review. So if you were around at beginning of this game, um, you will probably start out the game with your free space and Margarita, and soon you'll discover the power of Bisiden going into Margarita. And this is the classic cleave everyone was starting out their game with. And this is kind of where we all began. We wanted the fastest space to be able to have a Biscuit to follow up into a heavy attack and crit damage based Margarita. And that literally killed everything. It was a race about speed. Soon people discovered, Ascendo actually has better base stats and, Ascendo has more turn meter boost as at exclusive one. And in October for us who were playing at that time, we started to see the top tier team really being Ascendo. And this is where in the meta, and it was very, and again, I'm just going to focus more on, the classic arena meta here, is where we saw pretty much a very dull, boring simple meta where the fastest person wins. And that was pretty much the person who had the faster ascendo usually won the match. Because you will then pair that up with, your space and Bisiden and into that margarita. That was everybody's, go-to comp. And you scroll down, it's every comp, and you just need to be the fastest one to win. Shortly after that, I think there was a Miracle Wish event. Nizel was always in the game, but not a lot of people knew about, what Nizel could do. This was at a time where, there were a lot of changes, patches, people are new to the game, trying to figure things out. And when people discovered, hey, Nizel has a chance to freeze, and this was, I think, October and November, a lot of us trying to understand, how effective hit actually worked with effect resistance. So at that time, people didn't bother trying to stack Nizel up to like 100 or 150% um, effective hit. People were like, oh, 35% freeze. That's such a low chance compared to Sendo. You have 75 chance 75 or 80%, 85% base chance to silence the entire enemy team. So once people figured out you could put Nazil at like 150% effective hit and you almost will freeze the entire team, we started seeing Nazil a lot and we started seeing Nazil in combination with Ascendo or Space with Nazil. And these teams became top of the meta in November. Now, and this is also a time where we started to see more and more Lucifer in the game, where people. Now, I didn't put Lucifer on here because Lucifer was always kind of around a bit, but now you started. Lucifer was the alternative to Margarita, where people, used Lucifer with focus, and that was a time where, PvP was relatively simple. Um, and then right around Christmas, we had the introduction of our well, it's not the first limited hero. The first limited hero was Little Jack, but Little Jack was very disappointing. In fact, people prefer to still use Margarita over Little Jack. But in December, we really started seeing a change where a hero became so defining that immediately this hero became on someone that's on everybody's team. And started to have teams where it's second term based. So you see a lot more Santa running with Nizel, and this was the super painful meta time period in December, where pretty much if you couldn't deal with the freeze problem, you were going to be permanently frozen, and you will be literally soloed by a single Santa over a span of maybe 150 turns, where your entire team is frozen. So that was a brutal period of time until people, figured out, okay, everybody started building their snows, combined with Catherine, and hopefully, you can intercept right between the Nizil and the Santa, and hopefully you can do something as a counterattack to deal with the Santa at that point in time. Um, Fortunately enough, I think it was less than 3 weeks. It was right around Chinese New Year, and the devs gave everybody a Paul in. And this completely changed the control dominant meta, where control heroes were basically, in the lead for any composition. So first we started with our speed based meta, then we had control meta dominating. Now we have the third corner of the triangle, making it finally balanced. We had Paulin. So if you're using a control team against Paulin, we all know what that happens, right? So your entire team now gets turn meter, Paulin cleanses everybody. All of a sudden, pretty much, all the Paulin teams are starting to beat all the Nizil and Santa teams. And now we had balance in the meta. Speed was able to beat Paulin because, it's just straight up speed cleaving. No control involved, just going faster. Then you had control that can, Nizelle would start beating the space teams, and then you have Poland beating the Nizelles. So that was perfect. It was great. January was a great period of time where ev it was attacker's advantage. Everybody could, beat each other, and that was January. Soon came around February, and things became a little bit interesting. One thing is people realized that they could actually mix team together. So if you actually mixed a space with Panda together, for example, it created a very interesting situation where you have to beat the space and then deal with the Panda because you got now a very high effective resist team, but you also have the speed component. Well, people did figure out the counter to that was also running a space in Nizil. So you could use your Nizil and auto attack the enemy space, and then you have the speed advantage again. So people are trying to mix, the control aspect with the speed, or to mix the resistance with the speed. Or some people even tried, the Nizil Santa composition was also another interesting one where we saw a little bit of. But things became very different when we got a major rework on Mythic Hero, Brynhild. And this was the defining moment where we started to see the classic trio, Santa, Panda with with Brynhild. And often you were throwing up, Ben Austin with that group. And this is the beginning of the very heavy tanky team meta, where your cleave teams literally will die to the counterattacks of Brynhild. A Brynhild started taking down entire teams. Like you can say goodbye to, Margarita cleaves. Like Margarita cleave, the entire team will just be counterattacked away by a single Brynhild. Direct damage was no longer enough to take down this beast. She was so tanky. Combination of the damage reduction in the heavy cannon form, plus the base 40% damage reduction treated as consolidation from the wolf. So Brynhild was a force to be reckoned with. She was a one-man army, and starting February, all of a sudden the entire classic arena all got filled with Brynhild. Everybody started even converting their mythic heroes, giving up on Lucifer. Lucifer to this point was great, but then by this time, like direct damage dealers just wasn't enough to deal with Brynhild. There were very few heroes in game at that point in time to deal with Brynhild. You had to freeze her. But when the enemy is running a Panda and Santa and Brynhild inherently has additional 40% resistance or 30% resistance. I can't remember which one on her when she's in the heavy cannon form. I think it's 40. That made it super difficult. And February, I think February was the time where we suddenly saw a drastic reduction in the participation of Classic Arena event because it's literally Brynhild versus Brynhild, and then these matches will go on forever, and it was a painful, painful period. The top players, nobody wanted to attack one another. You'll be stuck with Brynhild versus Brynhild, and I think the devs were pretty quick at responding to that because shortly after the following month, we kind of had some sort of an answer to our solution. Nita got a significant rework. Nita was already pretty strong at that point in time, being able to trigger her own dots, but the rework made that exclusive one to trigger, and she was able to have more effective hit and attack based on her passive, and furthermore, she can now go up to 8 dots and combined with a focus as opposed to 6 before. This powerful cleave allow you to literally wipe out any other team, bringing the cleave team back into the game. So now at that time we started to seeing space into a strip, and then you had Nita and Focus, and then you had something else, the last hero to deal with Brynhild, and that was starting to shift the meta a bit. So before it was sort of like cleave, control, and then the tanky and second turn team, right? And now we started to see the pivot. We started to see that it is possible for for the Cleave team to make a comeback, and we have enough DPS to take down these Brynhilds. Those things took an interesting turn when we saw the introduction of Esther. And Esther did two things. It made the tanky team stronger because when Esther, you used to be able to survive a turn or two, um, getting the counterattack from Brynhild. Then we introduced Esther, and Esther increased direct damage by 80%. And we also increased piercing, which further, allowed direct damage dealer to do more damage. So then now you had the the perfect setup. You have the Panda, you have the Santa, you have the Ben Austin, you have the Brynhild and Bunny, which made the ultimate defense during that time period throughout April. That was pretty much your top meta team. And because Bunny was able to go first with 30% turn meter, she can also do the blue buff, allowing whenever you try to accidentally strip, you're going to lose 40% turn meter. So it was really hard to then strip off the effective resistance. So that team became the bane of the meta, and literally, if you did not have that composition, there were very, very few options against it. The Cleaves team just simply wasn't strong enough with Nita because the effective resistance is far too high without stripping the team. So now we again go back into a world where in April the meta was a very dull single team meta. It was basically the Brynhild with the super supports, and that dominated everything. Now, things started to change very shortly after that. Now, I'm also going to give Marvel honorable mention because Marvel also made stripping more difficult. Marvel didn't have as big of an impact until we saw Nordak, and then Marvel and Nordak became a really powerful pair when she's extending and preventing the strip from the damage immunity from Nordak. But we'll get to that in a sec. But Marvel was introduced in April. Really, her power really shined through once we got into June. In May, we got the Donald rework, and the Donald rework allowed us to. It wasn't as prominent until Lydia came into play, where controlling the highest damage attacker was an issue. But the key thing is we got the introduction of Whistler, and now when you have paired up with Whistler and Bunny with a direct damage dealer, all of a sudden we start to see direct damage dealing cleaves might be just strong enough to be able to nuke out the entire team. So putting a Bunny with Margarita and with Whistler, it was getting close. But I think Bolton and Bull came around the same time as well. I didn't put them on the icon there. But with these powerful direct damage dealers, we started to see teams where they could straight out nuke right through this tanky fortress of a defense known as, the Brynhild +4. So May became very interesting because now people can't truly just, put the super tanky team on defense because they'll get outsped. So Whistler really brought things a little bit interesting to the meta and allowed, the comeback of the direct damage dealing. It almost feel like every single month with the introduction of new heroes, we're playing this delicate balance game of trying to balance meta, making sure that the direct damage dealers aren't doing too much, where the tanky side wasn't tanky. And I can't remember which month it was, but I think it was also around this period of time where they extended that 40% damage reduction from Classic Arena across all the different arena types. Because at some point, without that 40% damage reduction, everything was just dying too fast, and it was a speed meta across the board, and that was kind of boring, um, not allowing some of the teams to really shine. And the first turn teams were just winning it all. In June, um, Popper was a hero that some regretfully today said they slept on, but Popper was really a key defining hero that combined it. And I felt like Popper really power crept space in many ways. It added so much more. You had the turn reduction allowing you to secure that first turn. Yes. and And Popper does the defense break, tenacity, down, and even strip. And upon death, stunning the entire team. That was just too full of a kit. Um, Unfortunately, building Popper do require a little bit more effective hits, so making and him being a newer hero was harder to get to exclusive 5 compared to space. And of course, increasing your turn meter by 30% is more impactful than reducing the enemy turn meter by 24%. Nonetheless, it's more than enough to secure that first turn. So Popper became, the go-to first turn securing hero, and he frees himself after, two of your heroes take a turn once he's exclusive too. So making him viable even against freeze comps. So Popper was a hero that, I don't think there was enough hype around him. If there was enough hype, I'm sure everybody would have gotten a copy, and some of our, dear friends in our guild wouldn't be complaining about how they didn't pick one up during the Miracle Wishes. But he was really impactful. Fortunate enough, I have both of them. I had one each on each of my accounts. When I saw the kit, it was just too good of a kit to pass up on. In the same month, we also got the introduction of Nordak, and Nordak then all of a sudden um, also made the tanky second tier teams more viable, giving everyone a 30% extra health plus an additional 20% of his health as a shield. All of a sudden, every Nordak team on defense became way more tankier. So now if you try to straight up cleave, it gets a little bit tricky. Before with Esther, with Whistler, pretty much things like Margarita, Belton, you could have just one-shot at everything, clean. However, with the introduction of Nordak, it became difficult. In fact, it made it difficult that Nita teams even had trouble cleaving it completely because Paladins sometimes have enough resistance to survive and then cleanse, and then the remaining, Brynhild is going to finish things off. So now we're in a world where, tanky becomes a little stronger. There's always this balance between tankiness and speed. And then everything we knew and we were comfortable with gets thrown out of the window when they introduce the most broken hero ever, Lydia, to a point where you were controlling the enemy on first turn. You were reducing damage further by 30%. It made the tanky teams so tanky, and it was stealing shields back and forth. Literally made it that if you didn't have a Lydia, you know, the classic arena top end team competition was basically gone for you. If you didn't have a Lydia, good luck trying to get to the top. But in about 2 weeks, a particular content creator, yours truly, started posting videos about how to beat Lydia team without one because I didn't have one. And obviously, as competitive as I am, for many of you who know me in our guild, I must come up with a solution. And I shared that. I think we're not as fearful of Lydia as we used to be when she was first released in the first couple weeks, where literally, if you didn't have a Lydia, you couldn't compete against other Lydias. I think we're in a little bit better place now. And that became even less of a problem when we finally got the Machello rework. Now, Machello rework was technically in July. It was end of July when the rework happened, but I think it was really in August. And yours truly again did a lot of work showing you how Machello should be built and how Machello actually is a very effective counter against Donald, Lydia, where these heroes became very prominent in the meta. So now again, we're reaching a place where, you know, it's truly attacker's advantage. If you happen to be in zone 3, you know how fierce the competition is and when you see the top ranked players are constantly changing. Everyone can beat everyone. We're again back to a world very similar back to January, where it's attacker's advantage. There isn't one defense team that can stop it all. I think players are now really you no longer see the same defense team. Everyone's switching up their defense team based on, what kind of, depending on who's attacking you. And I think some of the most successful team we still see a few, common heroes in there. You will see Popper, you will see Lydia, um, and you probably will see a Panda. And from there, you could be seeing anything mixed in there. Some people will mixing a Donald, some people will mix in Anita, some people mixing a Santa, Marvel, Nordak, like US. So I think the meta right now is quite healthy. It's very diverse. Um, put your mind to it. There's always a weakness in the team, and I hope you find them. So this kind of wrap up our first year review of the PvP meta. I hope you enjoy listening to me. I try to do maybe, I should have said at the beginning of the video. I'll make sure I put this in the comments is you can listen to this like a podcast. Hopefully my voice is soothing for you. I know some of you said that in the comments before. So I really hope you enjoy the anniversary celebration. Have a lot of fun. I know the devs have released a lot of great events and and rewards for you to get. Some are free to play, some unfortunately will cost a little bit of money. So I hope you really enjoy the next 2 weeks, and wherever you are, have a great rest of your day. I'll see you next time.